Welcome to the Unlocked podcast, hosted by me, Julia Myron.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome again to the Unlocked podcast. Today we have an amazing guest, somebody I'm very grateful the person came with a wealth of experience. The name of our guest is Makmid Kamara. He's the Regional Director for the International Fund for Public Interest Media. He was also the Director of the African Transitional Justice Legacy Fund, an organization based in Ghana that focuses on African transitional and reparative justice. And in this role, he supported survivor-led and community-based organizations in conflict and post-conflict countries to advance truth, justice, and accountability. And in August 2022, Makmid hosted a global summit on reparations and racial healing for historical crimes. He is deeply committed to social change and believes there's an urgent need to reunite Africa with its diaspora populations to progress reparations demands and facilitate racial healing. He's deeply committed to social change and believes there is an urgent need to reunite Africa with its diaspora populations to progress reparations demands and facilitate the healing. So thank you so much for coming. Welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. Thank you. It's a
You're
pleasure being
welcome.
here.
Thank you for coming. You're one of the first people who I was like, who do I invite on this podcast? And you were one of the first people who said yes. And then you actually came. So I'm very grateful. Very
That's
grateful to
great.
you. How are you doing? Where are you calling from? Are you
All
in?
right. I'm good. I'm actually based in Accra, in Ghana. So I'm
Okay.
speaking to you from Accra right now.
Okay, amazing. And tell us more about your work, what you're doing right now.
Excellent. So thank you again. As you mentioned in the introduction, I am currently Regional Director for Africa and the Middle East for the International Fund for Public Interest Media. And I'm also the founder of Reform Initiatives, which is also based in Ghana, and also works in Sierra Leone and other African countries to advance reparative justice and human rights and democracy. So I carry these multiple hats, and but for the purpose of this conversation, we'll be talking more about my transitional justice and reparative justice work, and not my work with IFBIM, which is about supporting public interest media in the continent.
Okay. Can you just break it down for people who don't know? I'm a transitional justice practitioner myself, but for people who have no idea what transitional justice is, because it's still pretty new, what is it? What is that about?
But transitional justice are the measures and actions that government, with support or in collaboration with civil society, take to deal with mass atrocities or crimes of the past, to deal with wrongs of the past, and to ensure that societies reconcile with each other, and that the perpetrators of these serious crimes or mass atrocity crimes are held to account, and that there is justice for victims and survivors of those crimes that have been or serious human rights violations. So it is a field that has been constantly evolving over the years, and a number of countries in Africa have experienced TJ and have implemented TJ mechanisms to deal with wrongs of the past. The country that I come from, Sierra Leone, is one example of such countries. The country that I live in right now, I live and work in Ghana, also had their own transitional justice mechanism. And we have a number of countries in Africa and across the world that have implemented transitional justice. So it is just, in simple terms, the measures that society take, led by government, with support of civil society groups and survivor groups, to deal with wrongs of the past, to guarantee non-recurrence, to reconcile society, and to ensure that those who have committed crimes against Their people are held to account to advance truth, justice, and accountability.
That's amazing. And one thing I love about transitional justice as well is you can be an international lawyer, somebody who is legally qualified and have a law degree like myself, or you can, there's also the policy aspect, and there's the civil society aspect, and then there's the government aspect. And I know one thing that drew me to transitional justice was how broad it is. So it is very, it's not just looking at an issue from the legal perspective, the policy perspective. It's trying to tackle this issue from every single angle. And I just
Yeah.
wanted to ask you, can you delve into one of the transitional justice projects that you have going on right now?
Well, absolutely. As you mentioned, the field of transitional justice is one that has been quite encompassing in terms of its adaptability and the development and evolution of the various mechanisms and processes has ensured that it is inclusive. It takes different shapes and forms, and it's not a one size fits all kind of measure to deal with wrongs of the past. Since it was started some years back in the 80s and later on, well, it didn't start per se. Arguably, it started way before the 80s, but it became popular or became popularized from the Nuremberg trials to some of the measures that were introduced in the 80s by Latin American countries that were dealing with the legacy consequences of military regimes, to countries like Africa and South Africa and Sierra Leone and Liberia that have tried various elements of transitional justice. Now, the field itself has has grown to the extent that initially, when people were talking about transitional justice, we had four core pillars that they would look at, and those four core pillars were the issues around truth and reconciliation, the issues around and this brought in truth commissions, like we saw in the TRC in South Africa, and you have the other elements which has to do with justice and accountability, which led to the creation of the establishment of special tribunals and court system to try those who are alleged to have committed serious human rights violations or atrocity crimes. And then you have the issue of reparation, which has a range of other issues, but principally ensuring that victims and survivors of these serious human rights violations and crimes receive remedy. But over the years, because of the expansion, because of the various um, dynamics of the field, we are now talking about, and this was codified in the Africa Union Transitional Justice Policy Framework. We're now talking about 12 to 13 different indicative elements of transitional justice. So it has expanded, rapid and not rapidly per se, but exponentially in a way that ensures that every element, every aspect that has to do with reconstructing societies, reconciling individuals and societies, ensuring guarantees of non-recurrence, ensuring truth, justice, and accountability are included in what will constitute transitional justice interventions. I've been involved in a number of these initiatives over the past years. During my time as director of the Africa Transitional Justice Legacy Fund, we explored and supported a number of transitional justice initiatives in the countries that we operated. But even prior to joining to doing this work with ATGLF, in my time at Amnesty International, we did a lot of work that were strictly speaking human rights work, but could be associated and linked to transitional justice especially in the context of the conflict in the Northeast, in Boko Haram, and in the context of uh, um, the militancy in the Niger Delta in southern Nigeria. And in my country, I started this the work as a journalist. I started my career as a journalist, and then worked with the interim secretariat of the TLC in Sierra Leone to just ensure that the media plays a crucial role in ensuring that people understand what was going on in the country at the time, and also become active citizens in the process. And that influenced what I later on described as the mediatization of transitional justice. And this was something that we tried in ATJLF, and which we're continuing to do with the Reform initiatives to ensure that we don't leave the media behind when it comes to transitional justice interventions.
Mhm.
Media is very crucial in not just educating and sensitizing the public about transitional justice efforts and processes, but in ensuring that the public are aligned with what is going on, and be actively involved in those processes, so that they own the processes, so that they contribute meaningfully to the development of the various initiatives and measures that civil society and others are implementing under the umbrella of transitional justice.
So what has been your most successful initiative? Like, for example, if you were to be like, okay, I'm calling it quits for transitional justice. I no longer want to work here, which nobody will blame you, because it has its struggles. But what would you be like? Yes, I did that. That was something I did. That was a very successful initiative that will hopefully outlast me. Have you had some of those yet?
That is a very tough one, Julia. A very tough one for me to choose which one stands out, because a lot of initiatives that um, were implemented are quite dear and close to my heart. In Sierra Leone, for instance, even before I became a staff of ATJLF, we worked on the Fumble Talk initiative, which is now one of the most celebrated community-led reconciliation initiatives in the continent, which has now been adopted and used by by even the development world, development sector, to advance community-led development initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
So, Fumble Talk was the initiative that was um, done to complement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's efforts to promote truth, to promote locally led and customized traditional justice measures, and to advance accountability. So that is one thing that I'm proud of to have worked on during my days as a journalist, but also as a Sierra Leonean citizen who survived the war.
Mm-hmm.
Then in my time at um, at ATJLF, one of the many things that we did was to support survival-led groups. So whether it's the organization in the Gambia called Wave, or Will, led by the phenomenal women. These are all women-led groups. Fatou Balde for Will, and Priscilla Sisi for Wave did some amazing job in getting survivors and victims of the Jammeh dictatorship to come together, women survivors and victims to come together to heal. So they implemented a number of initiatives that had to do with psychosocial healing for victims and survivors of these atrocity crimes. Because most, like you said earlier, most of the time when people hear about transitional justice, they think of the courts, they think of
Yes.
lawyers and
Mm-hmm.
judges. But because of the rapid evolution in the right direction of transitional justice, we have seen an expansion and inclusion of the space to include psychosocial healing, because we tend to look at the more tangible or things that you can feel and touch when talking about transitional justice, and forget about the emotional aspect that is and the psychosocial trauma that the experiences of either war or dictatorship cause on people.
Mm,
So Wave and the work of Will, for example, what Will did to get women who were victims of the Jammeh regime was to support them to come together. The
mm,
Kaneleng women, they came together and they were asked about what they wanted to do. And because they wanted to be economically useful to their society and to their communities, they said they wanted a community farm.
mm,
So normally you wouldn't see those kind of things in transitional justice interventions, because there's a thin line between that and community development. But we supported them. We took the risk at the time, supported Will, got this woman to develop this community farm, and they used that space not just for community farming, but for reconciling with each other, for
mm,
healing each other,
mm,
for telling their stories. So you had multiple benefits from this just one community space that was truly initiated by the women because that's what they wanted, and led by the women because it is them, and this is something that is all documented, and you can always check on. So
mm,
using one space to achieve a number of goals: the goal of healing, the goal of reconciliation, the goal of community building, and accountability. That was something I was really proud of. The other example that I mentioned is the Wave example, where the victims of Jammeh's witch hunt campaign, most of whom were women as well, most of whom were old women,
mm,
were then brought together. And a wave went out to these women, and because many of them had been excommunicated, many of them have
mm,
self-exiled, they're dissociated with communities because of the stigma and because of a number of things that have been, perpetrated against them. What
yeah.
we've bring these women back, it was more like the restoration of their human dignity by
Yes.
ensuring that they get a space where they can express what they went through, how they feel, and what they're going through, with people to listen to them, with people to actually listen to them, not just as um, criminals, but as people who have experienced serious human rights violations, state-sanctioned human
Mm,
rights violations, and yeah, so that opportunity brought them back to society. So that is something that I'm really proud of. And then the final one is the work that is being done by the Center for Memory and Reparations in Sierra Leone, where Joseph Kaifala, who is a victim of and survivor of war, not just in one country but in two countries, Sierra Leone and Liberia, has been working with young women and men to memorialize the Sierra Leonean conflict
mm,
by identifying those mass graves that the TRC in Sierra Leone identified and earmarked, protecting these mass graves, getting the communities to be involved in the protection of these mass graves, and using the soil from at least, I think, 11 or so different mass graves that they identified to create the tomb of the unknown civilian in Sierra Leone. I think that tomb of the unknown civilian is probably the first in Africa, the first and only in Africa, to memorialize those civilians who were killed during the war in Sierra Leone and who nobody has been able to memorialize all these years.
mm. That's amazing. I mean, you gave so much nugget. The first one I just really resonated with me was community development.
Mm-hmm.
I am a grassroots activist. That's how I started my career many years ago. So
Mm-hmm.
to me, grassroots led efforts are
Mm-hmm.
key to transitional justice. You cannot take that away. You know, as
Exactly.
much as we love the international lawyers, as much as we love the international policymakers, those people who have gone through and survived um, in these conflicts, in these human rights abuses, they should have a space. They should have a a means for them to address and put inputs in their own healing. And a
Yeah.
lot of what transitional justice is as well, I don't think a lot of people talk about a lot. It's also about culture shifting because you
Mhm.
spoke about, you know, women who were tagged as witchcraft and excommunicated
Mhm.
from their
Mhm.
communities. State sanctioned, that's because there's a mentality there. There's
Mhm.
something there that has caused them to think this is how we should think. And it's also about demystifying that, breaking that down. I mean, you
Mhm.
have tribal wars, and it started because you feel inherently that your tribe is better than this tribe, or this tribe is better than this tribe. That is the culture thing, and
Mhm.
much of the work of transitional justice, because the whole point of transitional justice is to make sure these issues do not happen again. That's the
Yeah.
whole point. How do we address these issues to make sure it doesn't happen again? But when you have those, especially those like it's just those tensions between tribes, between mentalities, stigmas. You have to
Mhm.
just going to court will not stop it. You have to do the work to demystify these things, to break it down. And the people who can do it is the people who are actually going to live in the country, the citizens, the victims, the victors, telling their stories. I think that is very important. And from what you're saying and what you're sensing, from what I'm sensing from you, I think Sierra Leone is a huge part of your life and a huge part of your story. Can you just explain why you're so passionate about, you know, not only is it your motherland, that's your country, but why are you so passionate about Sierra Leone, and how does that, you know, link to your passion for African development?
Very, very, really good question. Because sometimes the amount of frustrations that I get about that country.
Mm,
So, I love my country, and I my country has been a space for uh, a lot of experimentation on transitional justice, on international human rights, international justice processes since we experienced the war and since the war ended over 20 years ago. And Sierra Leone has a very troubled history, as a country that was also um, a base for slaves freed and rescued from the UK and Nova Scotia in Canada, and for all the troubles that they experienced and all the good things that they experienced. So it serves as a platform for a lot of learning and a lot of exploitation of experiences, and both good and bad. But I think there are so many good things that we could learn from Sierra Leone as well, from what it has gone through and how it has been able to deal with those experiences. I mentioned Fumble Talk and mentioned Center for Memory and Reparation. I also um, should mention the work that was done by the Media Reform Coordinating Group, which was one of the first media outlets that we actually supported to do a transitional justice work. And what they did was to develop and publish a TJ manual for media reporting, like for media, on how to report transitional justice issues, drawing from all the existing literature, whether it's the AUTJP or some work done by I think it's Internews on conflict reporting. So we don't actually have tools, and I think it's only ICTJ that did some training and some work a while back on how media can report on TJ processes. So we supported MLCD to do a manual so that we have something that people, media can draw from. And because Sierra Leonean journalists, a lot of Sierra Leonean journalists worked a lot on uh, on reporting the special court, on reporting the TLC, not just in Sierra Leone, but also when the court moved to The Hague. We had a lot of expertise there. And one of the things we don't do as Africans, and this is not just for Sierra Leone, but as Africans, is that we don't export. We don't necessarily export our expertise and knowledge in fields like this. We are
Mm-hmm.
always on the receiving end,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to ensure that we shift that paradigm from being recipients of expertise to exporters of expertise when it comes to transitional justice and
Mm-hmm.
human rights. So that was one thing that I feel that we need to do more. South Africa did that a lot. We have a lot of countries who go to South Africa to learn about how they did their TRC. We also are having that in Sierra Leone now. The Gambians came to Sierra Leone on a study tour to learn how it was done. And so just to stick to the answer to your question, Sierra Leone holds so many places in the historical trajectory of Africa and Pan-Africanism. A lot of the principal players in Pan-Africanism, whether it's IT, Wallace Johnson, and others, had their roots. They were Sierra Leoneans, and they worked with other Pan-Africanists across the world, not just in Africa, across the world, whether it's in the Caribbean or the US, to advance the cause of Pan-African liberation, to advance the cause of Pan-African development, and to ensure that the elements and the true elements and principles of Pan-African Renaissance is achieved or realized. Unfortunately, this has all been a number of years and still significant amount of work to be done to have that realization. But it still gives us hope. And as a friend of mine said, hope is discipline. It is that discipline that keeps you pushing, keeps you continuing with your advocacy or with
Mm-hmm.
your aspirations and just holding on, you
Mm-hmm.
know, to eventually achieving what you really want to achieve or what you
Mm-hmm.
want for yourself and for society. So yeah, so that is why the country features very highly in my life, not just because I'm a Sierra Leonean, but because of the experiences I have had as a Sierra Leonean and what Sierra Leone itself has experienced, which will be very useful for the rest of the world, not just Africa.
No, I love that. Again, like I as well, I don't know, I started identifying as a Pan-Africanist because apart from my sister, my little sister, I've never heard anybody say I'm a Pan-Africanist, but I grew up and I was raised in Nigeria. And when you say hope, like that is, you need hope to deal with your country. Like when I say I'm my country, Sierra Leone, it's like you're most disappointed in where you come from.
Yeah,
I think I'm Nigeria's harshest critic, not because I do not love the country, but because
yeah,
I know the potential of
absolutely,
Nigerians. I know the
exactly,
potential of
exactly.
African countries. And
Mhm.
that just makes you even more passionate about other
Yes,
African countries.
yes,
And in the
correct.
past, like 6 months, something has happened to me
Mhm,
where I am
mhm,
extra passionate about
mhm,
the development of Africa. One of the things I've been targeting in my life is in international law, you
mhm.
hear, oh, it's Africa. We're going to Africa because
Yeah,
that's where a lot of human rights abuses are. We're going
yeah.
to Africa. We're the only ones who get taken to the ICC. It's
I
the International
yeah,
Criminal Court. It
yeah.
seems it's only us that have dictators. But actually, I've learned through my work experience and stuff that no, Africa is the most continent that can do so much. There's so much potential,
It is the
and we
future. Africa is
challenge.
the future. So there's so
It
many
is
things that we have not even been able to explore yet as people.
explore. It's
Mhm,
like that is the future. We need to change, and that's the reason why I think practitioners like you and I,
mhm,
we need to change the narrative of we're
mhm.
going to Africa because Africa is bad, but we're
Yeah.
going to Africa because even though it's bad, we know there's potential there. Even
Yes.
when you say
Yes.
like
Yes.
exporting
Yes.
our knowledge, we have the best legal practitioners,
Yes.
we have the most
Yes.
smartest lawyers, we have the
Mhm,
best people, and
mhm,
that's not being showcased on an international level. I know as myself, as a Black African woman, what I've had to
mhm,
endure just to get my foot in the door for international
mhm,
law.
mhm,
If I can get to that stage where I can even shine more light on women and lawyers and people who are actually doing the work in Sierra Leone, in Nigeria,
Mhm.
fighting day and night in hopeless situations, but against hope, saying, we
Exactly.
believe in this country, we
Exactly.
believe in this continent. So now
Exactly.
I probably say I'm a Pan Africanist, and I know
Yeah.
that's much of your work, not just
Mhm.
for Africans in
Yeah.
Africa, but for
Yeah.
Africans in the diaspora
Everywhere. Yeah,
as
exactly.
well.
Exactly. Exactly. No, you are absolutely right. I think the we have a responsibility as a people to tell our own stories, good or bad, to ensure that we own our stories as well, good or bad. I don't think we should shy away from the fact that nation states are complex entities. They can never be the perfect country. Nowhere in the world there a perfect country. There can never be a perfect people. But what we need to do is firstly that acknowledgement of the complexities of who we are as a people, and but also the huge potential of what we could be as a people
Mhm.
if we not just work together but also own what we do and the stories that we tell about each other and ourselves to the world. I have been in this space for long, and I started this journey at a very young age to have the experience of seeing how things rise and fall, how people get used, and and how, but despite all of these, despite all of these, how people like Phoenix rise again from the ashes. And I think that is what Africa has been, despite the amount of things that have been bombarded on us, conflict, disease, all of those things, we continue to thrive, we continue to multiply, we continue, they still have to come here for the raw materials that they need for the development of their own countries and continents. So, there is nothing wrong with us owning ourselves, our authentic selves, right? And telling the stories in a way that would encourage more visionary leaders. But we have problems, of course. We have a serious problem of the lack of visionary leaders and lack of leaders who really can put the interest of our people at the forefront
First.
of their agenda. And that is the problem right now globally. We have a leadership deficit. We have
Yes.
self-leaders, old men who don't want to give space to young people, old men who don't want to give space to women, old men who are stuck in their ideas. And I'm repeating old men because it's all
It
old
was,
men.
oh man. It's true.
Mm.
It's
So
true.
it is about, and I think that is, just to bring the conversation back to TJ, that is the issue that we should learn from transitional justice actually, because it's one of the few fields that has not allowed itself to be stuck in the old ways. It is a
Yes,
field that
100.
has evolved, that has been adaptable, that has allowed itself to be adapted and adopted in different shapes and forms to ensure that it works for the people that it is meant for. So transitional
Yes.
justice is not just about the ICC, or it's not just
Yeah.
about taking former presidents to court and trying them and sentencing them to imprisonment, but it is about how communities in small towns and villages in the Gambia, or in remote towns in Mali, come together and say, this is our place, this is our society. We have been fighting and killing each other. We have to live in peace. We have to live with our differences, and we have to thrive. We have to survive. We have to develop. How do we do that? How do we ensure that, when we kill each other as brothers and sisters, we also forgive each other so that we can move,
Yes.
that we can
Yes.
and we can get our communities to move and to develop. And
Yeah.
you cannot get this anywhere, but we have them in Syria. We have multiple cases of community-led initiatives that advance truth, that advance justice and reconciliation, that advance remedy that repairs the wounds that have been caused by crimes committed by perpetrators. There are so many
Yeah.
lessons that people learn from how we heal as Africans. Uh, of course, there are so many wounded societies, so many wounded individuals in Africa, and that healing takes time. It's a long process.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah,
a parachute or fire brigade process, but
yeah.
it is being tried and tested in a number of places. It is about how we scale those ones that have worked and have been successful to other parts of the continent to ensure that they are adapted and they become norms so that the hegemonic interpretations of transitional justice from the West is then, upended.
Hmm. I love that you mentioned the West because transitional justice, one of the things I love about it, it's flexible. It allows for innovation. So it's not cookie cutter. It's not one size fits all. It's different for each country. And you'll be teased by this. So the where I'm working now, I'm actually working on implementing transitional justice and criminal justice reform in the UK.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Do you
Fantastic.
imagine how that is crazy? Like,
Fantastic.
because whenever we hear transitional justice, that's what I'm saying. We should not
It's
just say
always in
African
Africa.
countries.
Exactly.
The
Exactly.
US can use it with the racial problems they're having.
Yes. Yes.
They can
Yes.
use it with the racial
Absolutely.
issues they're having and the division. They need to go to Sierra Leone and learn and come back
Man. Yes.
and put it here.
Yes.
The
Yes.
UK, the criminal justice system and the issues they are having right now. When
Mhm.
my boss said, "We need you to design something for us," I was like, "Wow, do you know how innovative this is? Applying
Mhm.
transitional justice to a Western country."
Yes. Yes. Fantastic.
It's like
Fantastic.
I'm like, yes, because I'm just sick of the narrative that only
Yes.
Africans that
Yes.
need work. No, that's why I love transitional justice because no country can be like we're perfect. Let's
Yes.
focus
Yes.
on you.
Yes.
No, we can turn it around and say, okay, and so the police officers killing black and brown people in the
Yes.
U.S.
Yes.
Take this
Yes.
and go learn. Like our
Exactly.
African ancestors
Exactly.
say, go learn,
Exactly.
go put it in your
Exactly.
own too.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
not anybody being bigger than anybody. It's us collectively learning and applying things to each other.
Mhm. Mhm.
South Africa has had successful transitional justice initiatives. Sierra Leone, they've had
Mhm.
very successful like
Mhm. Yeah.
international justice
Yes. The
collaboration,
hybrid nature of
hybrid court.
TJ.
Yeah, that was innovative. I learned about it in school and seeing that we don't have to sit down and say, oh, this is how it's been, this is how it's always been. Guess what? Tomorrow we can say we don't even want to collaborate with the ICC. We're going to bring our own international lawyers. We're going to legitimize our own courts and we're going to do this by ourselves. That
Yes.
empowerment that transitional justice gives, that is why
Mhm.
I was just so drawn to transitional justice. And I said, I'm going to be a transitional justice practitioner. That's the
Fantastic.
best place to be
Fantastic.
because I cannot
Fantastic.
imagine being a politician or any other thing, fighting with these people for 30 years. I'm like, no, 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 no. I need
Yes.
something new, something innovative,
Yes.
something
Yes.
systematic.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
that's
Awesome.
just,
Awesome. Awesome.
it just makes
Awesome.
me so passionate.
Awesome.
Okay,
Hmm.
I want to turn the stage. You were an Obama leader for
Yes.
2023. How did that
Yes.
come about? And what did the experience teach you?
So I applied for for it. That's how it came about.
Good.
Uh, um, yeah. So I get these on my feed, on my news feed, on my LinkedIn feed, and so I looked it up, and I said, okay, this is interesting because it was more or less teaching emerging leaders about value-based leadership, the kind of
Mm,
principles that President Barack Obama exemplified when he was president of the United States, but also the kind of leadership that others like Mandela, Nelson Mandela, exemplified when he was president of South Africa, and even prior, while he was leader of the ANC from prison. So the fellowship or the leadership program was a 6 month program that required us to have or participate in sessions online, interact with other experts, including other alumni of the foundation leadership program, to just share their experiences with us, but also giving us an opportunity to share our experiences and our insights with them. And it was a space for peer learning, it was a space for coaching and mentoring, In fact, the coaching was probably one of the most valuable
Mm.
benefits that I got from the entire experience, and it just made me. Um, it's a space that will humble you when you hear what others are doing, and
Mm.
you think, oh wow, this I thought I was doing something, but there are other people are doing other amazing and fantastic work. And it was a community of people who want to have good leadership or want to demonstrate good leadership by inculcating the values of hope, of community, and of integrity and accountability.
So, what was one thing that you took away on how to become an amazing leader? Because first of all, let me tell you, this is highly competitive. So they don't just pick random people off the street. So you apply, but there must have been something about you that made them say, "This man belongs in this room." Because I'm sure as we're looking at other people, say, "Wow, these people have done a lot," they were looking at you the same way. So
Mhm.
thank you for being
Yeah, yeah,
preaching what you
no,
say. You know.
absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. It was highly competitive. I think at one point we learned that they received 4,000 applications and they
Mm.
had to choose 35. I did not envy them at all. Those who were doing the selection, I don't envy them because the continent, like you rightly pointed out, is packed with talent. It's packed with people
Mm.
doing amazing stuff. So
Mhm.
to choose from that list of amazing talent and leaders is quite a tasking job. So,
Mhm.
and I feel humbled. I feel privileged to have been selected, and I'm grateful for the opportunity that I had to also share with other Obama leaders from across the continent, and then but also across the world. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of exciting things happening in the Obama leadership community, even post the active fellowship or leadership
Mhm.
program year. So it is highly competitive. To stand out, you have to do things that stand out,
Mm.
and um, and be able to again tell your stories, just like we are talking about the storytelling from Africa, about Africa, by Africans. That is the same thing we
Mhm.
just have to apply,
Yeah.
in our individual spaces and self. Like the
Wow.
amazing work that you are undertaking now in the UK by bringing in transitional justice to advance criminal justice reform. It is just phenomenal. And I'm just
Mhm.
thinking about the various kind of things that you could be doing and the things that it could be learned. And this is what it means, right? This is what it means by uh, and these are the kind of things that have been written by post-colonial authors and writers and philosophers for years. What you're doing now is actually implementing what our ancestors, our Pan-African forebearers, have preached. You are manifesting that Pan-African vision and spirit, and I think you should be proud
Thank
of
you.
yourself. And I think
Thank
that is
you.
one of the things we should all be doing in any space that we find ourselves in or outside of the continent, where we put to practice the preachings and the teachings of our Pan African forebears and the teachings and practice of what we see based on our experiences, our lived experiences in the continent and outside.
Hmm. Absolutely. One thing I flirt with the idea of one day running for president of my country.
Excellent, excellent,
I flirt
excellent.
with some days I'm like, yes, I need to change. I need to be a leader.
Yeah,
Other days I'm like, girl, go sit down. So
because
I
nobody
want to ask
nobody will
you.
change it for us, and that was one of the mantras of the Obama leadership program, that we are the change that we've been waiting for. Nobody will
Mm,
make this change if we don't do the work, if we don't do the action. Nobody will
mm,
come and change it for you. So you
mm.
be the change that you are looking for. Be the change that you are asking for or waiting for.
Hmm. But I think that sometimes, right, with African leadership, it's almost like any why I hesitate and I take it very seriously and the sanctity of being a leader is because you feel in our politics, and as you rightly put it earlier, politics around the world, people are like any Tom, Dick, and Harry feels like they can run for office. You know, that's not just the case. I know that's not the case. Even though I have good intentions, I think I can do okay one day. The more I grow, I think to myself, I'm like, well, I just don't want to be an anyhow leader or people vote for me because I sound good. I want to have those principles that for African leadership. What are those principles to you? If you were to advise me, okay, Julia, you have how many more years till you can qualify to run for office? These are the things you should be working on now. What would you say?
I think firstly your integrity has to be intact.
Mm,
You have to have a reputation that precedes you in all the good ways.
mhm,
And because unfortunately you're a woman, the scrutiny is even multiplied, which is a sad phenomenon. The amount of scrutiny that is given to women who are interested in elective political positions in the continent and perhaps even elsewhere is much higher and robust than what's the way they scrutinize men, many of whom are the principal architects of the disasters that we're experiencing across the world right now, right? And it also shows that if more scrutiny had been done on these men, we probably will not end up having them as our leaders. So
100.
integrity is one. Confidence. You have to have self-confidence that, a number of things will be pushed your way. A number of mud will be thrown at you. A number of people will actually knock you down with just their words. To say, why do you think you can be, just like you said, why do you think you can be president? Do you think everybody can just wake up and be president like that? You have to have the conviction, that self-confidence and very firm conviction of what you want to be and who you want to be, so that nobody can knock it off you. That is really key, because you will get challenged, you will get
Mhm,
pushed, you will get questioned, you will second doubt yourself, or self doubt yourself, or second guess yourself. All of those things will happen. What will keep you is your conviction, yeah, your firm conviction and self confidence. And this comes, if you are religious, and for those who are religious, with a firm belief in God and ensuring that if God, protects you, you will be covered. And then the other thing is about, which is now getting into uh, a different terrain. It's about courage, right? Having courage to pursue your dreams and aspiration, the courage to articulate your plans and your thoughts, and pursue them in ways that sometimes can be unconventional, sometimes
mhm,
can be, but because they're innovative, you just have to be there and be consistent, consistent in your principles, consistent in your courageousness and in your conviction, consistent in your integrity. Uh, and then you have to do what all politicians should do, which is interact with your people.
mhm,
Interact with your people in various ways, at every level. Go down to the grassroots, to the community. I don't want to use the word grassroots, but go down to the people who actually vote. Most of the time, the people we talk to in these small spaces don't vote. They don't even register.
mhm,
Huh? The people who actually vote, they are out there, and those who talk to them are those who we don't want to vote for. So we have to um, really reach out to those people in their communities, in their spaces, and we have to get out of our own protective shells to reach out to the people who are the real voters. They are the real recipients of whatever damage is done to society, or whatever development is brought to society. They are the
mhm,
recipients who get them. So spread your message to them and interact. That's what Barack Obama did. Barack
mhm,
Obama was moving house to house, speaking to people, hearing their stories, and sharing his own stories with them. So there are always connecting points when you interact with people.
mhm.
Almost always, there are stories that connect people. There are
Yeah.
experiences that connect people. But you would not know those connections until you interact, until you share yours as well, and listen to other people sharing theirs. And I think that
Mhm,
is what a lot of good politicians have mastered. It is what an aspiring politician should master. And remember,
Yeah.
social media is not where your votes are cast. The votes are
Mm.
cast in community. But of course, you can
Mhm.
use social media as well. And in this day and age, you have to be multifaceted. You have to be, you have to use various methods and approaches to reach out, to listen, and to interact and connect. And you
Mhm.
also have to be a good listener as a leader. And that's where
Mhm.
I will end it. There's so many, there's a long list of things that one has to do.
Mhm.
And that's why a lot of time people sidestep these things and just go straight and avoid all the other crucial and critical elements of being a good leader. But if you ask me, those are the few that I will recommend, and I think you're already on a path on some of them.
And for what is your who is a leader in Africa? Or let's do who's a leader in Africa that's inspiring you right now, and who's a leader
Ah,
across the
Julia, don't
world?
go there. I beg, I beg, I beg, I beg, I beg.
Not even the president of Ghana. He's doing. I've heard good things about him. You don't think so?
Let's just say this conversation will be pivoted to something else. But for me, I think
That's
for me,
funny.
there are so many things that a leader has to do and has to be to really truly inspire me. And I mentioned earlier that we have a deficit of leadership
Mm,
in the continent and globally. And I
mm,
mean that in all seriousness. None of these ones right now inspire me. None of
mm.
them, not a single one, because they
Wow.
all have so many issues that I will be disingenuous with myself to say, oh, this one inspires me, and all that. There are so many things that is going wrong with our
Mm,
continent as a result of bad leadership. I think it was
mhm,
Chinua Achebe who wrote once about Nigeria's problems, and he
mm,
highlighted three things that were Nigeria's problems. One is leadership.
mm.
Two, leadership. Three, leadership.
Leadership.
I
Mhm.
rest the case for that. Those
I can't. Okay, I respect that. But where do you think this problem stems from? What is it like from our youth education? Is it we don't teach that integrity? Is it what is the problem? Is it people going there who don't understand the communities they're serving? What creates this vacuum? Because we also I say so many times in the UK, I've lived there 3 years. They've changed prime ministers like weather. Like these, it's like today there's a new. We wake up, there's a new prime minister. Change your laws. It's dizzying. What is the problem? What is creating this populist, out of touch leaders?
wow, that's a big one. That's a deep one. A number of issues, Julia. A number of problems. We there's a disconnect between the people and those who govern them. There's a disconnect between the young and the old. There's a
Mm,
disconnect between policymakers and political leaders. There's a disconnect between society and the development actors that work in those societies. There's so many disconnections, and it is not just internet that we are so lack of internet that we are disconnected from,
mhm,
or electricity that we're disconnected. We are disconnected. There's a disconnection between idea and practice. Those who have the ideas for
mhm,
what will work, and those who actually have to do the work are disconnected. So a lot of factors, and then you add to that the ever never ending interference and involvement of foreign actors who continue to take advantage of these disconnections, of these poor leadership, of this lack of structures, to continue to exploit, to continue to extract. Africa has always been this place for exploitation and extraction, right?
mhm,
Whether it's the extraction of our ideas and our people, or the exploitation of our resources, natural and human. So
Yeah.
it is this combination of factors that continue to plague us, that continue to produce the same set of people who we just recycle. They all come with um, campaign slogans for change and hope and all of those things. What they do the same. We can name countries, one after the other. You will see that opposition figures who criticize the incumbents come and do worse than what they did, than what the
Yeah.
people that were
Yeah.
criticizing. So it's not one problem. It is a
Mm.
multiple sets of problems. We also have a youth population that has become so despondent, and I wrote something about this, and I refer to it as the youth lash in Africa, which is a dilemma that we face as young people, that young people face around democracy and democratic participation. And we have a situation where the youth are so disengaged, are so disinterested, and it is that this interest is not happening in vacuum. It didn't come just all of a sudden. It's as a result of what they have seen. In the case of Nigeria, we saw how the youth were heavily behind Peter Obi, and then how their hopes and dreams were crushed when the elections and commission did what they did. The same
Yeah.
in Zimbabwe, the same in a number of countries where youth are getting arrested and detained, or they are being exploited with the growing um, extraction of people looking for cheap labor in the Middle East and elsewhere, taking our
Yeah.
brothers and sisters to Dubai and other places to go and work in very precarious conditions. So we have so many problems. I know we started off in a very good and high note for the continent, and I think people outside see these potentials, they see what Africa can do, so they're trying to suck that out, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I will reiterate that Africa is the future. That will not change. It will not change. What will change is about what future that is what we need to determine. Is it a future where we are in the driving seats and ensuring that Africans and people of African descent everywhere in the world benefit from not just the natural material resources of the continent, but also of the intellectual resources of the people? Is it a feature that will ensure that Africans don't have to run and go through horrendous journeys in the Mediterranean and in the deserts to get to look for what they consider as greener pastures, but they will stay in their homelands and take advantage of what is there because an enabling environment has been created by the states to ensure that people can either self-employ or can gainfully and can get gainful employment to make ends meet, to just make a living. What people need is basic living, basic social services, so that when they wake up, they don't have to worry if the light is going to be consistent. And today, they're going
Yeah.
to have consistent electricity power, or if they're going to have internet to connect so that they can and do online transactions and business. So those basic things, or clean drinking water, or if they fall sick, they can go to a hospital that will give them the right set of treatments and medicines for them to take. So all of these are what we want to see. What we want to see for a very prosperous, united Africa is not rocket science. It's not something that is unachievable. It's not something that is out of the ordinary. These are just basic things that
Yeah.
other countries have been able to achieve, other continents have been able to achieve. And I think Africa as a continent has the potential, has the resources, but lack the leadership and the mechanisms to achieve them.
Before we go, I wanted to say this because this is very important. I don't know if you know, but when the entire situation was happening with Peter Obi, obviously the election was rigged. We know it. I don't understand why it's 2024 and we're still counting election by hand. Like, are you freaking kidding me? It's like we have technology to
Yeah,
count this election digitally. They promised us, INEC, which is our electoral commission, the technology to count it um, digitally.
yeah,
They have the money. I think
yeah,
a lot of money, I don't have the accurate figures now, was invested in this, and all they gave us was a shoddy website that was not working after during. Everybody was going on there. It was not working. And then they disappear. They come back and say, okay, yes, this man is the winner of the election. What frustrated me and a lot of activists, including Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, I don't know if you know her, while we were still going through this situation, America was legitimizing the president. The
mm-hmm,
UK was legitimizing this president. This issue
mm-hmm,
has not even we were saying, okay, this is going to be argued in court. Peter Obi was like, we're going to trust the judicial system. It failed us because prematurely, but I think they knew what they were doing. They went ahead to confirm a president that has not been confirmed by our own people. So when you talk about self-determination, when you talk about democracy, why are you intervening in our democratic process? Last 2 years, the last 4 years, whenever that was, where there was a situation with Trump and Biden, no country prematurely said, "Oh, congratulations, Trump." Nobody said that. We waited till the process was complete. It took longer than usual. It took, I think, 3 months or a couple of weeks past when we usually know the result of the election. But every country waited patiently. We were not given that same respect. They prematurely confirmed a president that they had no business confirming. And this is what I say when I mean foreign intervention. I do not like it at all. It's almost like when you want the US to say something, they're quiet. And then you start to think about, is it in their best interest for Africa to grow? We need to start asking ourselves that question. Is it in their best interest for Africa to be strong? Because if it's in their best interest and they're pro-democracy, they will not intervene in an election when that's what they're fighting here, saying that the Russians did to them. So to me, it's just that double. It's just the goalpost is
the
always
double standards, yeah, the
and
double standards, and that is
you know.
the saddest part in all this in terms of international diplomacy or international relations. It is everybody for themselves. It is all about self-interest,
Mm-hmm.
and it is why as a people and as nation states we need to ensure that we strengthen institutions,
Yeah.
to work in the interest of the people, and to ensure that there are accountability mechanisms that are trusted, that are
Mm-hmm.
credible, and that can show up when they are required to.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming. I like to do this with all my guests at the end. Give us a reality check. What's something reality check? I mean, what is something we should know that you know from your experience that you're like, you guys need to get your act together. Whoever it is, it could be international lawyers, it could be whatever you feel in your heart that these people need a reality check. Give us that reality check right now.
I, I, I'm trying to think. I think human rights lawyers, human rights practitioners, what recently happened with South Africa's case at the ICJ should serve as a reality check for us. But what is also happening across the world in terms of the elections that are happening in various places, the example you gave about Nigeria, with all and the elections that are coming up in a lot of countries, should give us a reality check. The recent unconstitutional postponement of elections in Senegal, which has now been reversed luckily by the constitutional court in that same country, should also give us a reality check about how democracy works, what and why it is important to have strong institutions, not strong individuals, strong institutions to maintain or curtail the excesses of these individuals who want to continue to stay in power or want to continue to exploit and abuse their power for selfish interests.
Okay. Thank you so much, Makmi, for coming on. This has been a delightful conversation. I think everybody should listen to this conversation because I'm inspired. You're inspirational. Thank you for the work you do. I honor you. I know it's not easy all the time, but you've done it and you're continuing to do it. Congratulations on all your successes. And that is the end of this episode. And I'll try to get you back because I could talk to you for hours and hours on end, but I know you have other things to do. So thank you. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you next episode.
Thank you